So we're in this month of, or 2 months of joy cultivation in the Jewish calendar. And so I wanted to make sure that we're doing something that on the theme of joy. And I wanted to come at it from a little bit of a different angle. Right now, I'm reading a book, reading and rereading a book by Don Miguel Ruiz. You probably have heard of it. It's called The Four Agreements. And if you haven't read it, I know that it's been translated into a variety of languages, Hebrew included. So you can always pick that up and read it in your own native tongue. So it's a really quite a wonderful suggestions on how to live wisely. So I wanted to teach from that angle because it's what I am considering and what I'm energizing, what's energizing my own practice. And I think something that will help us in our cultivation of joy. So we're going to talk about the joy of I don't know. I don't know. There's actually joy in there, and I want to talk about how that works. And the third agreement within these four agreements of the four agreements is don't make assumptions. So that's easier said than done because, the truth is that we all want to know, and we fill in gaps all the time in knowledge. We hear a sound and we want to know what's that sound. We want to say, oh, that's the whatever. Or there are even studies that show that human beings, the challenge, it's not so bad that we try to predict what's happening or want to know what's going on around us. It's actually adaptive. We need to know what the sound is so that we can keep ourselves safe and things like that. But there's a danger in the fact that our minds are always trying to figure out what things are and have a certainty about not just what things are, but what they will be, how they will become. And they're particularly problematic in the ways that if in the current moment we are encoding the information that we're getting as if it's certain, without leaving the space for, well, actually, I heard this sound and I didn't see what it was. I don't know what it is, but that's what I heard. And the sequence of events the facts of the events were X. And the thing that I'm filling in the gaps on is all these other things, right? I heard these are the facts of what my experience was or how my experiences were, but there's all these extra things that we assume along the way. And there are studies that show that we as human beings much prefer certainty. We much prefer to feel like we know what's happening than even to be accurate. So we would take feeling like we got it, we know what's happening, over necessarily needing to have like real knowledge about what's actually happening. Just double checking my sound levels here. Everybody can hear? Is that a yeah? Okay, good. Okay, so yeah, we have this bias, we have this problem within our system. It's not a problem. It's not a problem unless you don't know what's happening. And when you know what's happening, then you can bring your attention to it and actually shift it. So it's not like we're dead in the water. We have no option for improvement. It's just that we have to know that a lot of times our system wants to know so much. It wants to have certainty so much that it'll trick us into certainty. It'll trick us into feeling like, you know what, that I know what that was. We can leave it alone. And then I'll file it away into my memory. And then later when I go back to get my memory out, it's like I feel like I know what it was, when really I had one input and then I added an assumption on top, and then that gave me certainty, and then I put it away. And it's not something that leads to good outcomes. It settles our discomfort. It makes us feel like, okay, I know, but it's not always so helpful. So one example of this is there's a student on a meditation retreat. And and keep in mind that on these meditation retreats that I'm talking about, your eyes are closed. So he says, when I hear the breathing of the girl I'm in love with on retreat, I think, oh, how lovely. And when I hear the breathing of the guy who annoys me, I think, how annoying. And we both know that they're just both breathing. We all know that. But when we were asked him, how do you know the difference? Because your eyes are closed. And he says, sometimes I have to even open my eyes to know which breathing is which and whether I should love it or hate it. I should like it or feel annoyed by it. It's like his eyes are closed and there's two people breathing next to him, and both of them just sound like breathing. And he has to open his eyes in order to see, is it the person I love? Is it the person I don't love? To know how he should feel about it. And that's the kind of assumptive model that our mind does, is that, if you're with your eyes closed, you can choose to assume that's the sound of the person I love. And it's quite pleasant. It's beautiful. It's kind of cute. It's like when you just start dating or something, and the person next to you is like snores a little bit or something. It's like, oh, that's so cute. But maybe after several years, or you may be annoyed by it, but it's like the same sound, but the context has changed. We have a chance to actually combat that internally. And I think that I don't know mind helps us break down some of that disappointment of trying to anticipate the future. We want to know how it's going to be. We have desires and aversion. I want it to be like this. And when it's not like whatever we want, we desire, then it's like, oh no, that's not how I imagined it. That's not what I wanted out of this situation. Or we also have the aversion to things. We can actually have this time when we feel like, and I don't want it to be like that, but I don't want to hear that sound. But I don't like that the gardener is outside in the yard. And then we can get all worked up about it. Or really a bigger challenge with this is fantasy. And this is something that I've worked with a lot in my own meditation, is recognizing that sometimes when the reality that I'm in is challenging, or I get distracted, or whatever, for whatever reason, and many of us do this, I'll start to build and paint a fantasy of the world, of where I would rather be, of how I think things could be, and not where they are. It's almost like you're in dry land and you wish you were on the ocean, or you were thinking about a beach vacation in the winter time, or you're hoping to go skiing in the coming season, and you're thinking about how sweet the thing that will come is, instead of actually enjoying what is now. And when we do that, it's not a bad thing that we anticipate future, but if we're not satisfied with what's happening now, it actually causes us great discomfort, especially when we've determined how we have like an ideal picture, how exactly it should look. And then it doesn't come out like that. It causes us some kind of like tension within us. I remember Sylvia Boorstein was teaching a few years ago on a retreat, and she did a whole talk on just the truth of change. And the one constant is change, meaning the only thing that is never changing is the fact that things are always changing. And that's true. And if you've lived long enough, and you don't have to live that long to notice this, but things are constantly changing and adapting, and we don't know how it will be, and we can never really anticipate fully how things will come to be. And she said that actually, when we are more comfortable in that sense of I don't know, of the sense of clarity that things will change, it's going to change, it's just part of inevitably how life is, we can actually take comfort in that. of in that I don't know mind, we can say, well, let's see, and let's see, and let's see. And it can become a curiosity instead of a feeling of, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And, kind of a sense of dread. I'll talk a little bit more about that and why I think that as a Jewish practice, as a spiritual practice connected to divinity, we actually have, I think that it actually is a stronger container for this I don't know than if you were to not have a divine energy in it. But that's my opinion. And I think, we honestly do try to make reality match our assumptions. And this is when it can become dangerous also, just in terms of us taking things we don't know and then trying to paint them onto the world. Once there's a story about once there was a man who found his axe was missing. And he suspected that it was his neighbor's son that had taken it. And so he was watching this kid walking around, and he was convinced that is exactly the walk of a thief. That is exactly how a thief would talk. That's exactly how they would move around. Of course, they look like they're guilty. And then later that day, the man found his missing axe. He just misplaced it. And after that, he noticed that his neighbor's son wasn't behaving like a thief anymore. Think about that, the power of that in terms of he suspected this innocent person. And then because of that, he started to find justification for why it is that this person looks like they are guilty. They look like a thief. They sound like a thief. They smell like a thief, right? Whatever it is. And we do that too. I think we can do that too. In a lot of ways, we can look out into the world, and if we're not careful, we can decide someone is some way, or something is a situation is a particular way. It's not what I wish it was, and then we can find all the ways which it can't work, or this person is not the person I hoped that they would be, or they're not the most upstanding character because whatever you decide what it is, and then you go find it. And then what the danger is, and I think this story is pointing to, is that when we do make those assumptions, then we just go and fill in the gaps. Like our mind is very, very happy to fill in the gaps. We'd rather not just sit there and say, that looks like somebody who's walking. I don't know where my axe is. Perhaps someone took it. Perhaps I misplaced it. I don't know, right? And to actually judge it generously. And of course, here's the beautiful part of this, and why I think this brings peace and joy, is because Sylvia mentioned that the greatest peace you can find is in being comfortable with the truth of change. And I think that that's true. That's not just peace, it's also a certain kind of joy and uplift, because you just kind of take yourself out of the role of trying to be the person who needs to know how it'll be, because you don't need to know how it'll be, and you don't know how it will be. And when you are comfortable with that, then you can kind of relax and just see how it's going to be with curiosity and openness. And you'll find that when you do this over time, over and over, you remind yourself, well, I don't know how that'll be. It'll actually become part of your default set in time. You won't have to force yourself to keep reminding yourself all the time that you don't know. You'll just remember it most times what you do and don't know, and you can be comfortable in that. It's a muscle that we build. And of course, we're not going to get it right every time. And especially initially, when we're trying to install these kinds of practices into our lives, these kinds of, theories into our lives. But, then the fourth agreement in Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements is try your best, do your best, always do your best. And that's something that we can do. That is a place that we can we can control that. How hard we try, that we can control. So I'm going to transition us into our practice, and I want to just give a little bit of a story, or a reminder of a story from the Bible when Moses is nearing the burning bush. I think it'll support our practice. And this is my way of thinking of how a divine energy in the practice and in this way can actually help us feel comforted in moving forward without certainty. So Moses is at the burning bush, and he gets this message telling him, you need to go and free the slaves. I noticed that they're suffering, and I need you to go and be my messenger and take these people out of Egypt, out of slavery, and into the promised land, whatever that means, right? Take them out of slavery, reduce their burdens. And Moses does, I think, what we do, which we've been talking about this whole time. Moses wants to know, what's your name? Like, he wants to have certainty. What's this divine energy that I'm talking to that is speaking to me? And I don't know if it's literally talking or what's going on there, this sort of sensation of feeling, of knowing. What can I call you? He wants a certainty about what name to place on it. And, we use all kinds of names for the divine in our day. Jesus, God, Allah, Buddha, whatever, right? There's a lot of names that people use. But the answer of this divine energy is, the first thing it says is, Ehyeh imach. It's like, I'll be with you. And Moses can't let it rest. He's like, I need something more than that. Don't just tell me I'll be with you. That's not a name. That's just a reassurance. And the next time, the response is Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which I want us to use as our mantra today. The answer, what that is in translation, it can be, I'll be as I will be, or it'll be what it'll be, or I'll be what I'll be, or Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I don't know. It's something like, it's indicating, pay attention to what you are actually noticing in the time that you're noticing it. And that's where I'll be there. Like, you don't need to worry about what's next. Just pay attention to what's happening with you, and that's where I'll be. And to me, I'm working with a divine that's compassionate, that's loving, that is the foundation of love and safety and peace and joy. And so when I hear that word, that term, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, it brings me great comfort. It reminds me, well, it'll be what it'll be. Why don't I just pay attention to what it is right now? Be okay with knowing what I do know, or thinking I know what I think I know, and knowing that I don't have all the answers here, and there's some greater force out there that is going to continue to lead me out of my slavery and out of my narrow places. If I just learn to trust and take the leap of faith and stay engaged with what's happening, things will turn out great. And most of us have the experience that when we just pay attention like that, life turns out pretty spectacularly. When we're open in that way, things go well. It's great. It's wonderful. So I want to offer you that mantra in our practice. We'll spend 20 so minutes meditating now. And I haven't done mantra meditation with us so much because I think there's a lot of value to the open kind of vipassana breath practice and some other of the cultivations that we've been doing that actually helps us to start to notice the contents of our mind in a different way than a mantra that kind of fills it with a particular kind of cultivation. But I think that now it's important for us, if we're trying to cultivate a purposeful attention to the fact that we don't know and a comfort with it. We want to have some kind of feeling of support in that transition to being okay with just letting life unfold as it unfolds and being okay and not having to know. To me, this ahiyeh asher ahiyeh, even the fact of saying it will actually, it helps us because it's the words that we use actually do change the direction of our lives. It's like, we're going to be now looking for the ways in which we are blessed. We're going to be looking for the ways in which things turn out great every time as they turn out. It'll be how they are is just fine. And I can find comfort in how they are and not have to know. So those words actually are important. And this is part of the 4 agreements. It's be impeccable with your words. That's the first agreement. So I think this is an important way of integrating that practice. Good. So you don't have to do it in Hebrew. You can do ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. And I think that there's some mystical power to doing it in the original language, if you'd like to, if that's comfortable for you. But you can also do I'll be that I'll be, or I'll be what I'll be, or it'll be how it'll be. And that's the phrase that I want you to kind of keep going while you're practicing. So you'll connect with your breath and connect with that phrase. It'll be as it'll be. And each breath, it'll be as it'll be. Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh. And when you inevitably notice, the same technology of meditation is going to continue to go on for this practice too. You'll notice that your mind wanders away at some points. You may actually notice that the mantra practice holds your attention better. So you'll see how this works for you.